Okay? He executes the macro, and macro internally executes the query. As it has access, it will show the result set to the user, but he cannot do anything else apart of the statements which you included in the macro. So that's where we can control the accesses on the objects to the users without giving them the extra access or extra functionalities what they can execute on the objects. Okay, so let me repeat it again. When we have statements in the macro, the accesses on the actual objects are not required by the executing users. Without any access on the object, by executing only the macro, he can do the operations which are defined in the macro. It is enough for him to have exec privilege on the macro, but not the actual read or write accesses on the objects. And macros may contain only one DDL statement, and that too at the end of the macro definition. Why it is? Can anyone guess? Macro may contain only one DDL statement, and that too at the end of the macro definition. As per the above characteristics what we discussed, you may guess why it is. Yeah, Shashidhar. Shashidhar?
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
How does this macro different from procedure?
Yeah, I'll come to that later.
Procedure.
I'll come to that. Okay. So, first see these characteristics of macro. If anything is similar to stored procedure, in stored procedure, is it true that if any of these statements failed in between the macro execution, will everything will be rolled back even I commit it? No, right? Shashi?
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. In stored procedure.
You are asking that.
Yeah. For example, I have 100 statements in stored procedure.
The stored procedure.
Yeah, that's what. Here you no need to write. This is the characteristic of macro. It not depend on how you write. Okay? This is characteristic of macro. If you have 100 statements and if the macro failed at the 50th statement, it will do a rollback of all the 50 statements which were already executed. Okay, so that is the first usage. And the second characteristic what we see, the actual access is not required on the object.
Okay.
Okay. So with only exec access on the macro, you can perform all the operations defined in the macro without any access on the internal objects. Yeah, and some people has answered it correct. Okay, why we have only one DDL statement allowed, that too at the end of the statement, because of the property of a transaction. When we are saying the macro should execute as a single transaction, we don't commit any of the transaction when they complete. We commit them at the end of the macro together. All the statements which were executed successfully, they will consolidate and will commit everything at once at the end of the macro. Okay. But DDL statement is auto commit always. We cannot control it, right? DDL statement is always auto commit. Once you execute a DDL, at the same moment it has to be committed. So these two characteristics are contradictory. For macro, the commit should be at the end of the macro. For DDL, the commit should be at the point when you execute the DDL itself. So these two characteristics are contradictory, and these characteristics are coincide at the end of the macro definition only. That's where we can keep only one DDL statement, that way at the end of the macro definition, where the macros commit and the DDL commit coincide, and we can execute it. That is a characteristic of the macro, where it will allow only one DDL, that way at the end of the macro definition. And these are the possible operations what we can perform on macro. You can create the macro, we will execute the macro after creation. You can see the definition of the macro by show macro. If you want to change the definition of the macro, you can replace the macro. Even it is existing macro or even it is a new macro, you can use replace macro and create it. And once you feel that macro is no more used, you can drop the macro. And if you want to see how this macro SQL is being executed, if you want to see the parsing engine plan of execution of the macro SQLs, you can use the explain plan with the exit macro. So these are possible operations what we can do with the macro. Okay. So this is a simple definition of how we create macro. Create macro, macro name as select whatever SQLs, the definition of the macro, some set of instructions. It could be one statement, it could be 100 statements, whatever statements we want to include. Most probably all the DMLs, selects, updates, inserts, all statements we can embed in the macro definition. Okay, so this we have to remember. Create macro, macro name. Macro name is a user defined name as, with a parenthesis, we'll start writing all the DMLs, and at the end we'll close the parenthesis, separate with semicolon, execute it. So the macro will be created with the name macro1 by storing the definition in the data dictionaries. Once we have it, we can execute it with execute keyword or exec, the first 4 letters of the command, exec or execute, complete command, macro name. We want to replace, this is syntax, replace macro, macro name as, we may add one more column here. The same query, just added one more column. So we have replaced the definition of the existing macro, execute it, it will store the new definition in the data dictionary now. And it is to explain the parsing engine plan of execution of all the SQLs written in the macro. If you don't want to use this macro no more anymore, you can drop it with the drop macro, macro. You'll see a simple example here. See, okay, that's nice. Okay. So this is, try create macro, macro name. So let us write some macro one as, create macro, macro one as, I just wanted to insert one row here, the customer table, and after that I want to update the statement, the 2 update statements. So I have combined all these statements in a macro. See, the first statement is insert, second statement is the update, third statement is again one update. So let me execute this. object cost1 does not exist. Okay. So the default databases we have to manage. Database retail. Okay, macro one already exists, so let us try to have some other name. Okay, create macro completed 0 rows return. So the definition is stored in data dictionary. So the macro is being created. Now how do we execute this macro? With exec macro name. Okay. Let's execute it. See what is the error? Duplicate row error in retail.cost1. What does it mean? While inserting, we are trying to insert a row which is already existing in the set table. That's where it is getting an error, duplicate row error. Okay. Let's see why it is giving the error. Let's see the table definition. Just a moment. Yeah, sorry. So, okay. So what we are seeing here, when we executed the macro, and while execution of this insert statement, we were thrown an error that there is a duplicate row error. Why? Because this is a set table and we are trying to execute the insert statement to insert the same row again. See, this is a set table, so it won't allow the row level duplicates. And the row what we are going to insert 101 new upsert, and with this date is already there. See, 101 new upsert, the date, and with the null values, income, or this one. I think same row we are trying to insert again, which it won't take. At least a single column should be different when we are inserting the new row. That's where it will allow the record to be inserted. So we have to change it. So if you want to change the definition, what is the command we should use? Somebody got unmuted. So replace macro, which would update the definition of the existing macro. Now execute the macro. Oh, is it? So 108 is also there. So we'll try with big number. Okay. And again replace the definition. Now execute it. Okay. So now see why we are getting this error repeatedly. It is not with the insert statement. Now it is with the update statements. Okay, we are trying to update 101 record with the values where it is throwing the error. Let us change the number here also. Okay. So what we are doing? We are inserting a row with 118 and we are not inserting income and gender here. What we are doing, we are updating the same row which we inserted here in the insert statement with the income of 1,20,000 and with the gender of M. You may do it in a single statement, but I am doing it in different statements. Anyway, just to demonstrate the multiple statements in the macro. Now execute. See, 3 rows completed. That means insertion and 2 updates. So earlier, if you observe, the problem was with the update statement, but this insert is also got rolled back. Insert was done, but as this update was failed because of the duplicate error, the insert was also rolled back. So now when all the statements are successful, we have the row with the updated value in the income and gender. Let's see the values. $118 we observed. So this is the insert statement, and then we updated the income, and then we updated the gender. Okay, once all the 3 statements are successful, then only we can see the result committed in the database. Otherwise, even there is an error at any of the statement, it used to roll back. Okay, that's what we have seen in the demonstration. Got an duplicate error here, but it has rolled back the insert statement also. That is how you can execute a simple macro. Okay, we have created it, we have replaced the existing macro, we have executed the macro. What are the other operations? You can see the explain plan of the macro by prefixing explain keyword with the exec macro. Okay, it is not with the direct macro name, but you have to have exec keyword also. Then only you can see the explain plan of the macro queries. Okay, so please remember explain, exec, macro name. You can see how we are going to execute those statements. Insert and a single amp operation on the update, because it is based on the primary index value in the where clause. And then again one more single amp operation to update, where we are using the primary index in the where clause. So, no rows returned in any of the statement. It is just an operation. It is not select. So you can see the explain plan, and you can see the definition of the macro by giving show macro name. Here exec is not required. Just show macro name. The object type you have to give in the show. So this would give you with what definition you have created this macro. Okay, sometimes you may have to create a new macro and you have a macro already created, you have to do some little changes in the table names or something. Then you can see the macro You can copy and paste the macro. You can make your changes. You can configure as per your requirements and create a new macro by changing the name. Like that, you can see the definition and you can use it to create another macro and to understand the logic in the macro. What else you can do with macro? You drop. Okay, if you feel you are not going to use this macro anymore, you can drop macro name. See, drop macro completed. So if you see the definition now, you cannot have it because it got dropped. It is dropped from the data dictionaries. So macro 9 does not exist. Okay, so these are all possible operations what we do with a macro. Yes, Amir. Shamir?
Yeah, as you said, when already the one macro is existing, then we need to recreate another macro. So, do we have a command like mentioning that create or replace macro command?
Yeah, you may use create or replace or direct replace. Could do create or replace, both operations will be performed by replace. For example, the macro 9 is not exist now, right? So that is the error. Show macro, the macro not exist, so I can use replace macro directly to create the macro also. Replace macro completed. So replace will check the definition if it is already exist. If it exists, it modifies. If not exist, it will create. Now if you see the definition, the macro exists. So with replace you can do create and replace both.
Yeah. Okay. So which means rather than create using the create macro command, we can just create or replace. Yeah, that's what I see.
Yeah, I mean in views you see this. I'm just looking at them. Create or replace is accepted, or only replace would do the requirement. Let me drop this again. I'm dropping it now. So this is the definition what generally we use to create or replace, right?
Yeah.
So this is a syntax error here. So just use replace. It will do both the functionalities of create and replace. If it is not exist, it will create. If it is exist, it replace. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Thank you. Yeah, Venu.
Manoj, I have two questions. The first one is that what is the use of DDL command at the end of the macro? Because DDLs are, we create the table to store something or to do some transaction within that macro, right?
So it all depends on our requirement. If you do a particular number of SQLs and if you create a table, okay, with a log information like is it completed or not, like that. Okay, you may create a table.
Just as a DDL, right? It just creates the table. We don't insert anything. If it is inserting, then it won't be a DDL at the end.
You are creating at the end of the macro, and you may use this table which is created in the macro in the next step of any other job.
Okay.
Just to make communication between two different jobs, okay, you may have to create a table at the end of this macro so that the table will be used in some other process.
So what I understood is that so this is the only way actually, not so it may be used based on the requirements. That's all.
Yes. I mean, this is the characteristic what we explain. This is the option. If you want to use, you can use. It is not mandatory that you have to put a DDL at the end of the macro. If it is required, you can put it at the end of the macro, but you cannot put it any other place in the macro.
Yeah. So other question, my second question is that so you just said that if we do the replace, it also checks whether the object exists or not.
Yes.
But somehow what I feel is that this feature will create a confusion, right, for the developer. Like suppose if you have given the macro name the wrong macro name, but your intention was to replace the existing macro. But in this case, it will create a new macro with the wrong name,
Yeah.
and the old macro will still have the old definition.
Yeah. So once you execute, you have to see what it is doing here.
Okay.
Okay. So it is under our control. Is it creating the new macro, or your intention is to update the existing macro? So
But
once you
a
create or
message,
replace, yeah, the message is always replace. Not here. I'm saying. So once you create it, you see the definition again to see if it is as per your expectations or not. So it is our
yeah,
control.
so
So we
you
have to
have to
give a
be
proper
double
name.
checking the thing.
Yes. And it is already there with create and replace or views, right? So how we are ensuring that we are creating our own view with our requirements. In the same way, we have to ensure ourselves when we are
But
using it
why data is providing this option at all in the first place?
to update it. Okay, it is a facility they thought. Yeah, so have to use it.
Is there any specific reason to look into the existing macros and create even with the replace command?
Yeah.
Is there any specific case where they thought this is may be a beneficial this feature?
No. The benefit, I mean, is that if you are replacing, that means if it exists, replace it, otherwise create it. That is the benefit. But is it going to make any other concerns? Then we have to control ourselves.
Okay. Okay, well, there is no such scenario where they thought of it would be a
Yeah.
beneficial. Like,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, then. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, if your questions were already clear, please drop your hands. Iqbal?
Hi Manoj,
Yeah.
a question regarding macro.
Mhm.
When you create a parameterized macro, can you pass the value from the other tables, like from the lookup tables?
Yeah, yeah. I will come to that. The next concept is this. You will see the parameterized macro.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But I mean, as you asked, the other table columns to send is not possible. It seems. Okay. So we can send the literal constants. Because we have to declare the data types and the literal constants can be passed. I'll show you. Yeah, Rajnish.
Can we have nested macros?
Calling macro within another macro.
Yes.
Yep, I think we have. Example. We have this. Okay. And let us call first macro here. And let us change this. Can you mute Rajnish? Okay.
Sure.
Yep. So it's completed. When you execute this, exit macro. See, this is the output of the other macro, which we are calling from this macro, where it is inserting and selecting the data. Okay, so this macro definition is to insert and select the data, and we are calling this first macro one from the macro 9, like this. Okay, so the nested macro. So this is what you are asking, right? Nested macro, calling macro from another macro.
Yes.
Yeah, so we can do that.
Thank you so much for showing that. Yeah.
No problem. Thank you. Yeah. So let's see the parameterized macro now. Okay, Purnima.
Yeah. see on the macro, as you said that the logic behind that the last statement, if there is a DDL statement, it has to be the last because it is auto committed. But
Yeah.
in Teradata, all the SQLs are auto committed, right? Whether they are DML or they are DDL.
Yeah, in Teradata, all the statements are auto committed, but if you write them in macro, they are not auto committed.
Yeah.
So the statements will be committed at the end of the macro definition. So the whole macro is treated as a single statement there.
Yeah. So no, the logic which you gave that having the DDL as the last statement, that is not clear to me now.
See, DDL is a auto commit always, even you put it in macro or even you put it in SQL extend or anything. The DDL is auto commit. It has to be committed at the same time when you execute it.
But
the
even
state,
if you write it as DML also, that is also auto commit, right?
if you write in macro, it is not auto commit. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
In SQL assistant, it is an auto commit. Yes, your understanding is correct. But if you write a statement in a macro, it is not auto committed. When it will be committed, is update at the end of the macro.
Okay.
Okay, so when you write in the macro, the characteristic will be changed for the DMLs, but not for the DDL.
Okay, you are saying DDL will still remain auto committed whether it's in the macro or not in the macro,
Yes,
right?
yes. Always DDL
Okay,
is
okay,
even not in even in the macro.
okay, okay. I didn't get that point. Yeah. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, Shamir.
Yeah, Manohar, when we are creating one macro, and there are a lot of SQL is happening, so all the body, each and every part will be separated by semicolon. Was it right?
Yes, yes. We should separate each statement with the semicolon.
Okay. Does anything basically as per my understanding and what you explained, macro which is used for the many SQL statement can be accommodated in a single macro. Am I right?
Yes.
So so are there any condition which cannot be given through macro? Any constraint or restrictions?
That is the constraint, the DDL. Right. So you can accommodate a number of DMLs, but you cannot accommodate a single DDL at any other position except the end of the DDL. That is one of the constraints I can think of. Are you expecting anything else in the question?
No, I'm not. I'm just asking a stupid question, maybe.
So
I don't have anything in my mind. Just I'm asking.
that is the only constraint as of now. If you get to know anything, then we can discuss.
Sure.
Yeah. So we'll see parameterized macro. In this macro definition, we have hard coded the values to be inserted here. Right. So whenever you execute this macro, the only row that can be executed, the only row that can be inserted to this macro is 119. But this is not the requirement for me every time to insert only 119 record in the table whenever I execute this macro 9. Most of the cases, what we may need to do, we may have to change this number, this name or date of joining. These values would change for each and every customer when they are newly joining, right? So the customer number will vary, the name, the joining date, everything would vary. So how we can behave, okay, how we can make our macro generalized in such a way that it will insert whatever number we want at that moment. If you hard code here, it always inserts 119, which is not requirement, okay, which is not our requirement. So I want to make my macro as generalized in such a way, whenever I want to execute this macro with a value 120, it has to execute. And next time when I want to execute with 121, it has to execute with 121 without changing the macro definition. Without changing the macro definition, I want to have this functionality should happen with different data values. Okay, so to have that flexibility to deal with different data but the same functionality, we can generalize the macro by passing the parameters. How do we pass the parameters to the macro? See the syntax. Create macro, macro name, and before the as keyword, we have to start passing the parameters within parentheses. It is in between the macro name and the as keyword, we have to specify the parameters. The data type of the parameters and the name of the parameters, we have to specify there, so that these are treated as the parameters to be passed to the macro definition. And when we want to refer these values, these variables in the macro, we have to prefix them with a colon, like this. Colon value 1, colon value 2, so that it will substitute those values during the execution, during passage of the macro. So this is how we pass the parameters to the macro. Exec macro, the first value integer is 100, second value integer is 200. So these 100 and 200 values are substituted here for value 1 and value 2 while execution of the macro, and will give you the result of that particular conditions. So this is how we pass the parameters and we refer the parameters in the macro definition, and we pass the values during the execution of the macro. We'll try a simple example. See, I have a macro here, which we already created just now. First macro 1 with the hard-coded values. So whenever you execute this macro, it will try to insert this and select the data. But now I would like to make it as parameterized. So this is the replace macro, first macro, replace or create, whatever it may be, it will try to create it. And the customer number, I want to pass it as an integer, and customer name, I want to pass it as a varchar of 20, and the as keyword to start the definition of the macro. Insert statement, and in insert I would like to insert only the customer ID, customer name, and joining date. Yeah. So customer number and customer name I have parameterized. So to pass or to access the values passed through the macro, I have to prefix them with a colon. So colon C number, comma, colon C name, and joining date I am still hard coding. For every day I may change the definition, whatever it may be. So I just wanted to show with a combination of parameters and with combination of literal constants you can use this. Okay. So I'm inserting the 3 columns in the table: customer ID, customer name, and joining date. And out of these 3, 2 values are parameterized, which will be passed during the execution of the macro, and the date. Date is literal constant here. And after that, I'm just wanted to select the data and see if this particular value is inserted or not in the table. So I'm just trying to create this. See, the macro got created. Now, how do we execute this macro? Exec first macro with parameters. And if I don't pass parameters, again you will get an error. See, the macro, first macro requires parameters, because in the definition we are passing the parameter, and while execution we are not passing them, so it will throw an error because it is expecting the parameters. So we have to compulsory provide the parameter values like this. For example, customer ID as a customer number and customer name through macro. This is the name I'm just passing. See, it got inserted, and the next statement is to select the data. So this is 100 through macro joining date. And now if I want to insert the other customer number like this, I'm not changing the definition of the macro. What I'm doing, I'm just changing the parameter values. The definition is same. The same functionality would execute now again with the different data values. Say 120 to macro 1. So like this, you can generalize the macro so that the same functionality would work for different data elements every time without changing the definition of the macro. And rest of the properties are same. You can drop this macro, you can explain this macro, you can replace the definition of the macro. All other functionalities are same. Okay. Yeah, Rajneesh. Wait.
One small question actually in this, when you are inserting data, if a user doesn't have privileges on the underlying table, but it has the execute privilege, still we are able to update and insert data into the table?
Yes, that is the characteristic of macro. The user who is executing this macro no need to have write access on the customer table, but he executes insert statement and gets the data inserted. So this is the major characteristics of the macro, where we can control the accesses of the object or access of the users on the objects by not giving them access, but we are allowing them to do the operation what they're supposed to do. Okay, so this particular user has to insert the data, so he can do only insert, he cannot do anything else with this object. Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is, like, can we have a if and else statement in the macro or no?
No. The procedural statements are not possible. The loopings, if, for, while, these are not possible in macro. The simple, straightforward statements.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, this is also one of the difference between stored procedure and macro. In stored procedures, you can use the procedural language constructs, the live loops, the variables and all those things. But here in macro, just pass the parameters. All the statements are very much simple. There are no loops, variables, no procedural constructs. What would you say? Yeah, Neha.
Manohar, in the parameter, can we dynamically pass the tables from which we want to select the data or something?
See, okay, if I understand,
Mm-hmm.
you may write a subquery here. I'm getting my echo. Can anyone else please mute yourself?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah. If you want to write a subquery here, and out of that result, the upper query has to behave. Okay. And if there is any condition you want to pass to the subquery, those values also you have to pass here as a parameter. That you can do. But the table columns and tables you cannot pass as a parameter through macro. Okay. So if you want to pass a table name as a parameter, you can do that. And the table name you can use, but the table columns you cannot pass. Okay. Yes, Santosh.
Manohar, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think right now you are in retail or financial. Which database are you in? Retail, right?
Retail. Yeah. Retail.
Okay. Now, when you create this macro, I think it is getting created in the default database that you are in. If a user, for example, I have a user from the business team, there's an account created on the username. If I give this macro to the other user, all they have to do is prefix the macro name with retail and execute it, right?
Yeah. So if their default database is different, then they have to prefix with the database name or username and execute.
And it doesn't matter if they have access to this particular database itself or not. I mean,
No.
I understand the tables, but the database.
They should have access on the macro.
how is that handled? Just like a table or a view,
Yeah,
you
you
can
can provide
I mean,
access to
add this
only the
data from
macro.
the macro. Okay.
Yeah,
So, for example, the user doesn't have access to retail database, but if they are given access to this particular macro in retail, they can still execute it, right?
yes, yes.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Shamil?
One question regarding the create set table. Can I ask that question?
Create set table. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. While we are creating, as usual, we will create no fallback, no before journal, and blah blah blah. And finally, we'll write like unique primary index, right?
Okay.
So also we can can we add partition and indexes? Can we add a partition and index while we are creating a table?
Yes. The indexes, the indexes you are saying secondary index or primary index?
A normal index. I seen a table statement which mentions as index, just index.
Just index means it is secondary index. Primary index,
Secondary index.
the primary keyword should be mandatory for creation of the primary index. If it is a simple index, it means secondary.
In the same table, I can see a unique primary index, and then a primary index name, then a few field names, then partition by range. Okay, and then index one index name, and then there is some other ID.
Okay.
And the same ID, primary index also mentioned as an index.
No, primary index is not mentioned as an index. It is a unique primary index, we already said. So only one primary index can be created for the table, and rest partition indexes, secondary indexes you can create along with the definition of the create table. Is that what your question? Can we create indexes, secondary indexes along with the create table structure? Is that your question?
Yeah, actually, if you just, I pinged you here. This is the statement.
Okay. Unique primary index partition by. Let me type it. Can I copy it?
Yeah.
What is not taking? Not able to copy it from here. Okay, tell me what the question here.
Yeah, my question is, if you look at there, I can see this is one of the working create table, okay, which I was worked. So their revision ID is there as a unique primary index. Also index also we mentioned.
See, that's what I'm saying.
One of my previous colleague wrote this query. I mean, this, table definition and etc.
Okay. Can you ping that in Google so that everyone can see that?
Yeah, I can ping.
If everyone can see the chart window here, you may not see, right? Yeah. Just ping me in this one.
Just I'm pinging Google.
Yes, it shows some real-time thing that I would like to share to all. Okay.
Yeah, I pinged it.
Here it is, unique primary. Okay. Yeah. Now tell me what is your question.
No, I'm asking, there is a unique primary index and index also mentioned.
Yes.
So I confused what is this index and unique primary key, primary index.
Unique primary index is the primary index for the table, where it should be
fine.
only and only one for the table. Okay.
Yeah.
Partition is there for the partition primary index, and then it is the secondary index. At what time you can create a secondary index? Maybe at the time of create table, or maybe after the create table also you can create the secondary index. So here in this scenario, he is creating the secondary index at the table definition itself.
Yeah. But
on the same columns. Is it? No, not on the same columns.
Yeah, the same, yeah, revision ID.
The revision ID, but there is some other combination also along with the revision ID.
Yeah, combination is there, yes.
Yeah.
Parent business ID and parent.
So he might have identified the combination of these three columns are used very much in the reports in the where clause as a combination. So he has created this as a secondary index.
Yeah.
Is it in report they use these combination of the columns?
We are using. Yes, we are using that one very much.
Okay.
Hierarchy, basically hierarchy and all.
Sure. Okay, so for answer your question, a second index can be created at the time of table creation also, or after the table definition and after the table creation also.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So we have some small topics here to cover. Just cover within 10 more minutes. Hope node has some problem. Yeah. So this is the sampling. Okay, this is used for profiling the data to see some sample of the data as a result. Okay, sometimes you get to take a decision on the table, on the indexes or on any of the constraints. You may have to see some sample of the data. If you create, if you write a statement like select star from table, it will try to retrieve all the data if it is millions of data exist in the table. But my requirement is to see only some 10 records to just get a basic understanding how the data looks. So is there any way that I can restrict the data without any condition? I don't have any condition to restrict the data, but I want to see only 10 records from this table. How we can restrict the records by adding a sample keyword. Sample the number of records, so that without any proper where clause condition, you are filtering the data randomly, so that you will see only 10 records in your result set. Yeah, that is the purpose of the sample. Okay, just to see a few records from the table as a sample without any proper condition, you can use a sample keyword with the number of records. Okay. So if you give a number, it is treated as a number. If you give it as a decimal, it will be treated as a percentage. Okay. If you give a dot before this, it will be considered as the percentage, the 25% of the data you want to see. Okay. If I give dot here before 10% of the data I want to see. So if it has 1 million data, 10% of it, so probably 1 lakh records. Okay. If we have 3 millions of data, based on the simple calculation, the 10% of the 3 million records, 3 lakh records will be displayed. So like that, you may mention the sample as per the integer number or the percentage, the 0.25, 25% of the data. And you can give multiple sample numbers so that you will get more random samples. Okay, the first sample is of 10 records, the second sample is of 20 records, third sample is of 30 records. So total you will get 60 records with more random sampling. Okay, you can provide multiple integer numbers with the select keyword so that you will get random, very much random samples. You may give sample 60 also here, right? So 60 will give you one particular sample, but you want some more random samples. So first sample of 10 records, second sample of 20 records, third sample of 30 records. So totally will get 60 records, but with more random sampling, so that you will get all scenarios of data as a result. Similarly, you use percentages also. You want to get all the 100% of the data, but 0.25, 0.25, 50. So it is not a good example. Okay, you may see 0.10, 0.10, 0.20 like that. So that 50% of data you are getting, 40% of the data you are getting, but with random sample. Just I would like to show you an example. Select star from customer. See, I have 23 records here. So I just wanted to see sample of 10 records. See, only 10 records I will see without any condition. I wanted to see 10% of the data. Just add a decimal point. So what is the 10% of 23 records? It is 2.3. If you round it is 2 records, so we'll get only 2 records. Okay. If you want to give 0.10, 0.25. So what's the value? 2 records, and 0.25 means 25% of 20 records. It is almost 6 records or 5 records. 5 plus 2, 7 records, 8 records. With that rounding factor, it will show you 25% plus 10%. So it is 8 records here in this scenario. So multiple sampling can give, and percentage sampling can give an integer concept. Okay, integer sampling can give. Sample cause has invalid arguments. So the combination is not possible. If you want to give in percentages, all the factors should be in the percentages. Otherwise, all should be in integers. See, 10, 5, 15 records. If you want to give all percentages, you can give or all integers. And it would give also same result, right? So 15. But it is a sample, single sample. And with 10,5 you are getting 2 samples of more random data. So you can use this in the profiling part. Okay. And null if 0 and 0 if null. We have seen yesterday. When you are getting null from the data, if you want to convert it to 0 and show, then you can use this function null if 0. If you are getting null from the data and if you want to show it as a 0, you can show it as 0 if null. Let me repeat it, I might have confused. If you are getting 0 from the data and show it as a null, then you can use null if 0. If you are getting null from the data and wanted to show it as a 0, you can use 0 if null. For example, yesterday we have seen one 0 if null, right? Similarly, if column 3 is 0, then it has to be shown as null. And in this example, vice versa. If column 3 is getting null, it will be converted as 0 and show. Okay. And along with this, we have one more function called coalesce. Okay. What is the functionality of coalesce? Coalesce will take number of parameters, n number of parameters like this, and it will return the first not null value of the list. And this is the coalesce usage. Select coalesce of some values, n number of parameters. Out of these parameters, the coalesce will return the first not null value. So what is the result of this? 4. Right? So let me remove this. Now, what is the first not null value here? 5. See, like this, in an n number of parameter list, it will return the first not null value. Okay. In general real-time applications, okay, for example, if we have a scenario like in the customer table, we have the 3 types of phone numbers: the work phone number, the home phone number and the mobile number, for example. Okay. If work phone number is not null, you have to identify it as his contact number. Okay. Preference contact number is home phone number, work phone number first, and then the next priority should be given as his home phone number, and the third priority should be given to his mobile number. So this is the priority. So while you are displaying his preferred contact number, first you have to check his work phone number. If it is not null, then display it. Otherwise, you have to check the home phone number. If it is not null, you display it as his preferred contact. Otherwise, you have to display his mobile number as his preferred contact. If three are null, then finally it is null anyway. But we want to give a priority to these numbers. You have to validate one by one. Whatever is first not null, you display it as his preferred contact. This is a simple scenario. You may have to do an exercise. If you want, you can do an exercise to create a table of customer, create 3 phone numbers for him. Okay, work phone number, home phone number, and the mobile number, and use this colis function, display his preferred contact. Okay, for whom the work phone number exists, that should be his preferred contact. For whom work phone number is not there but only home phone number is there, the home phone number should be displayed as the preferred contact number, otherwise the mobile number. If all the values are null, then what police will return? A null value finally. So at least one value should be there so that it can display the first not null value in the list. You got the example? In real time, how we use police and what functionalities? Yeah, we know. You know? I have a question.
Oh, do you hear me?
Yeah.
I will know. I have a question on the sample function.
Okay.
So how this data pick up the data randomly? Is there any format or algorithm inside, like whether it picks up the one?
Internally, it may take the random AMP samplings. Okay. It will particularly pick up a AMP which is not very much busy and will pick up the data from there.
Okay, so again, it depends upon the primary index.
Not depend on the primary index. Okay. So whatever AMP is not doing much work, which is sitting idle, so it will pick up that particular AMP to pick up the rows from that AMP.
But that's not the exact, so because you are talking about the performance or the utilization, but the data distribution of the data is depend all the if you want to look at the distribution of the data, then we have to pick up from all the AMPs, right?
Yeah, from that AMP you may not get all the data of a single primary index. Okay, in a AMP you may have different primary index values also.
Yeah.
Right. So you will get different rows, or it may be it may be sampling of 2 or 3 AMPs also. If there are 2 or 3 AMPs available, it may get sample from those AMPs also, multiple AMPs. So finally we'll get the data without any condition.
Okay. If I give the 2 numbers in the sample, like for example, first is 25% and second is 50%. For the second 50%, will it take the 50% of the old data or 50% of the remaining data, which is the 75% of the old data? How it calculates?
It won't pick up the 25% which was already displayed. It will consider the remaining data to pick up the data. That's where you will get random samples, more random.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Purnima? Purnima?
Okay, so actually my question got clear. So this is not same as top 10. It's because it is picking up data randomly, right?
Yeah, randomly. Yes.
Is there any equivalent of top 10 or something like that?
Yep, yep. You can use top also.
Top also?
Yes. So here you want to use top 10 star. Should do that. Which is existing in all other RDBMS. Sample is extension here, but it is compatible with the top, which exists for other RDBMS. Okay. And if you are willing to get only one sample, it is preferred to have the top. If you want to have multiple random samplings, then use the sample. Otherwise, if you want to have a single sample, prefer to go with top itself. Okay. Iqbal, please drop your hands once your question is clear. I see many hands raised. Yeah. Yeah, Iqbal, go ahead.
Yep. My question is, can we use case statement if we don't want to use coalesce?
Yes, yes, certainly. The case statement exists in all the RDBMS, so you can use the case statement, but case statement will become very lengthy while writing the query. Coalesce internally execute the case statement itself. Okay, so what coalesce do? Case when the column is null, then the next column, like that. Okay? How the case structure will work, the same way the coalesce would also work. Internally, coalesce will call case expression itself. Okay. And these two also, null if 0 and 0 if null, they also internally call the case statements. Case when the field is 0, then null. Case when the field is null, then 0. That is the actual execution of this null if 0 and 0 if null. Yeah. Shamir?
Hi, Vinod. Actually, coalesce is one of the something which I am unable to understand properly always. The same case here also, like this particular statement is used to find out the first null, right? Is that correct?
First not null value.
First not null value.
Yeah, to display first not null value in the set of parameters.
Yeah, if I use a statement called a coalesce, then opening parenthesis, some field name, comma, then some null statement. How will be the, what is the result for that?
Okay. Coalesce of
field name.
Field name. Yesterday we have seen an example with null if 0, right? 0 if null. The same thing you can expect coalesce also. Okay, let me show you that again. Coalesce of, let me see if there is any null value here so that you can understand it better. I think we have many null values. See, the short name is null here. But while generating report, I don't want to show null. Okay, I want to show some blank character there. Okay.
Yeah.
So how we can do? Otherwise, gender. To see gender if it is null, then we have to specify something like space or something. We should not leave it as null. So that is our requirement, for example. Okay. And how we can do that? Select coalesce of gender, comma space. From cust1. What it will display now? It will see if gender is null or not. If it is not null, display the value of gender. If it is null, then display the other not null value, which is blank. Okay, we should give at least one blank space. Otherwise, it is also again.
Yeah, blank space. Yeah. Maybe you have to open one new one.
Sometimes in the demo version it is
Sometimes
getting stuck.
sometimes it will happen.
Yeah. Okay, after this session, I will send you one recording of OLAP SQLs. So please go through this on the Sunday, okay, the next day, where Sunday is a holiday. Just take your leisure time and go through this OLAP SQLs and come up with questions on Monday. Yeah, and along with this, I will share that feedback forms. So tomorrow there is no session. So just go through that recording of OLAP SQLs, your own, in your leisure time. Just come up with your questions on Monday. Database detail. We'll complete this and we'll discuss for today. Select police of gender, comma, space, fram.
Or you can mention unknown or something.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would have displayed null. Yeah, whatever value you want to display, unknown or null or not applicable, whatever.
Yeah.
Unknown you want to display. So whatever gender is there with not null, it will display them. Whenever it is null, it will display the not null value here as a second thing.
Okay.
See? For whichever row it exists, it displays. Otherwise, it don't display null, but it will display the other not null value in the list.
Yeah. Thanks, Manohar. This was one of the confusing thing always for me.
Oh, is it? Okay. Is it clear now?
Yeah, it's clear, very clear.
Sure. Okay. Oh, I see so many hands still raised. Can you please drop if your question is already cleared? I will come one by one. Yeah, Shashidhar.
Yeah, Manohar. Is the collapse equivalent to decode and case statement, wherein we specify some condition like column A equal to 25, then the string is known, otherwise it is unknown. Like that, can we give in collapse?
Actually, even decode is a bit different. It depends on a particular column. Right? There is some condition in decode, and then as per the condition, it will behave in the remaining display values. But here, Colis is simple. The concept is display first not null value. I don't think decode is having the same functionality. It depends on one particular condition, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it is not almost same as decode, but yes, the functionality of decode can be performed, but it is not exactly same as decode.
Okay, this is to better handle the nulls.
Yeah, better handle the null values to avoid displaying them as nulls. You can manipulate them with some different keywords or spaces or valid values. Maybe if it is an integer value, displaying a null in integer is, I mean, it doesn't make any sense for reports for the end users, right? So they want zeros.
Yes.
In case if integer should be a null. So you can manipulate here so that if, for example, it is an income, displaying income as 0 doesn't make any sense for reports. You have to make income as 0 here, 0.00 at least, so that they can understand, okay, there is no salary for this month or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more question regarding that sample. When we give multiple samples in percentage, how does that calculation happens? Like 25%, 25%, and then 50%.
So it depends on the number of records the table has. For example, it has 100 records, and if you use 0.25, then 25 records will be displayed. It is random. It has no condition. Okay? The number of records displayed will be depend on the total number of records existing in the table. Is that what your question?
Okay. I mean, my question is how the multiple sample gets executed. In this query, select sample ID column 1 from table 1 sample 25%, 25%, and 50%.
How means, see, if you give 0.10, then first 100 records, okay, out of 100 records it will take the 10%, that is 10 records, and then again one more 10 records of the remaining 90 records will be picked up. So totally you will get 20 records as 0.10 and 0.10, where there are 100 records total.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem. Yeah, Ritu.
Yeah,
Actually,
Manohar,
just a moment. We are done with this session. Okay, if you want to drop, you can drop. I mean, just dealing with the questions. So if you would like to interest in hearing the question and answers, please stay online. Otherwise, I'm done with the topic for today. Thank you. Yeah, Ritu.
yeah. Can we give the where clause in the statement when we are using the sample also?
Yes. Along with
So
where.
it would be given before writing sample.
Yeah, where clause should be before the sample. Yes. So first it will qualify the records, and
Okay.
out of the qualification records, it will give you the sample.
Okay. Okay. And in that, can you go to that slides, please?
Mhm.
Yeah. In this statement, suppose that select sample ID column 1 from table 1, sample 10, 20, 30. So first it will take the 10 samples, then the 20 will be from the remaining ones, right?
Not remaining. Remaining means, okay, the remaining records in the table, is it?
Yes, the
Yeah,
remaining
yeah.
from which have 10 have already been sorted out.
Yeah, yeah, it will
It must
ensure
count that.
the same records of the sample don't repeat in the other sample.
Okay, okay. Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Amit.